Your dreams are bigger, bolder, and more badass than the life you're living now, but something just keeps getting in the way. Join certified coach and former therapist Diann for the Driven Woman podcast. She'll show you how to get rid of whatever is holding you back so you can stop spinning your wheels and up-level your life. Get ready to hop in and buckle up. This is the Driven Woman podcast, and we're heading for the fast lane.
Well, hey, Driven Women, I've got a surprise for you. Today's guest is a man, right? Are you surprised? I thought you might be. Listen, the Driven Woman podcast is produced with the driven but distracted female entrepreneur in mind, and that has not changed. Now, you might be surprised to see that a man is joining us as a guest, but I invited John Sovec because he is no ordinary man. He is a therapist, a coach, an internationally recognized speaker, a writer, soon to become a published author. John is also a yoga and mindfulness teacher, and he's one of my closest friends. John and I have known each other for a number of years, and you will hear an interesting story about how we first met and why I needed to move through fear in order to make that happen. It's one of John's many areas of expertise, how to do things even though we're scared. And I think you're really going to enjoy today's interview. So please check out John Sovec's website, follow him on Instagram, where he's just getting started building up a following. And you might want to check out his YouTube channel as well, where John shares mindfulness, meditation, and breathing tips. Today's podcast review is from Dear Det, also known as Melanie Lockert, a speaker, writer, coach, and host of the Mental Health and Wealth podcast, where I was a guest recently. Melanie writes, "Love Diann's energy and personal approach. The episodes are informative and personal, entertaining, and full of ways to be more productive and kinder to ourselves." Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate the review. And if you want to hear Melanie and I talk about ADHD and money troubles, you need to check out the episode that we did on her podcast. And again, that is the Mental Health and Wealth podcast with Melanie Lockert. Now, speaking of content and the Driven Woman, I need to know what you want me to feature next. I will be doing a brand new series on mindset blocks, because there's nothing like a good old mindset block to hold you back from reaching your goals. So there's a little quiz you can take. There's a link in the show notes. You'll see it right under the section that says, "Want to help me know exactly what content to feature?" Click on the link. It'll take a couple minutes of your time. I want to get enough of you logging in on that quiz so I know exactly which mindset blocks to address in the future episodes and what order to address them in. So please participate in that and let me know. And while you're at it, you can leave me a review too. I mean, hey, you can pick one or the other, but why not do both? Okay. Without further delay, I bring you the one, the only, my friend, John Sovec. Enjoy. Well, today's guest is my very good friend and colleague, John Sovec. John and I have known each other. We were trying to figure out exactly how long, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years. And for listeners of The Driven Woman, you might be surprised that there is a man on the show, but you will soon learn this is no ordinary man. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. And I have to tell you, I'm so honored to be included in this conversation and to be the male guest.
There may be others in the future, but you will always be first.
There you go.
In fact, speaking of first, maybe we should just share with the audience how you and I met. You were speaking at a local professional event. I don't even remember the topic. I just knew from the moment that you stepped on the stage, you were very commanding. And while you might expect this of a professional speaker, the fact is, at the time, you were a practicing psychotherapist in private practice, and so was I. And we are generally not known for having a commanding presence or for really enjoying public speaking at all. So you had me right away.
Well, it's funny because so what the event was, I actually remember this. I was doing a presentation for other therapists about how to grow their practice. And one of the things to me that's so important about any of us who are trying to build a business or trying to build a brand in the world is we got to get out there. One of my mentors shared with me this thing. It's like, you could be the best therapist in the world, but if nobody knows you're there, you can't do the work you love. And so for me, it's been this journey about like stepping up and speaking at events, doing webinars and podcasts and writing and like really getting this out there. Because for me, mental health care is such an asset to how we grow as human beings that I don't want it to be hidden behind closed doors anymore. I want people to know that this is actually a really cool and great thing to do for yourself.
It's so good. And I think because I hadn't known too many therapists by that time who were clearly as comfortable marketing themselves, talking about marketing, speaking in front of a group. I mean, talk about moving through fear, which is obviously our very juicy topic today. But I don't even know if I've shared with you how intimidated I initially was when at the end, as usual, people stand in line to say thank you to the speaker. And of course, I don't know how many people were in the room, but at least 100. And most of them just got up and scurried away, looking at their watches and so forth. But there were a number of us that stood in line to thank you personally. And I decided that even though I was a little nervous and a little scared, and I had no idea whether you'd say yes or no, I wanted to see you again, and I was going to invite you to lunch with me. And I remember as the line was going on, I was sort of observing that you were very gracious, but I thought, oh, he's probably getting a little tired. And I started to think, oh, maybe I'll just follow up by email. And I thought, no, girl, you waited in line this long. You just need to do it. And you had told me later that there were some statistics involved with this that you figured out.
Well, you know what? It's so fascinating.
Like how many people were in line and how many people?
It's usually less than 10% of people who are willing to like step up to that next level in any fear-based moment.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here talking, like you said, in front of like about 100 people. And I can tell from being on the stage and looking out at the audience who actually has the potential to like grow and hear this message and who got overwhelmed within the first few seconds and kind of shut down. And I think that's just such an important thing. You know, there are all those books about leaning in and all of those things. And as a speaker, you can look out and you can spot the people who potentially are going to like step up to this next level whenever you're having these conversations. And the thing that's actually cute about this too, so I had mentioned in my talk that one of the best ways to like make connections in the community was to just reach out to people that you respected and invite them to coffee. And I had shared like my personal experience when I was starting up. I'm kind of a brave soul. I do admit that. I'm a jump into the deep end kind of person. Diann knows that about me.
True that.
But I would just cold email people and say like, wow, I read this article you wrote, really amazed by it. I want to take you out to coffee and learn more about you and your work. I would say probably 99% of people responded with a yes. So I put that story and that challenge into the room. 100 people, about 10%, stood in line and wanted to chat and say, and I think 2 or 3 of you actually said, I'd love to take you to coffee or love to take you to lunch. Mm-hmm. And you were one of them.
Mm-hmm. And here we are all these years later. And until I moved from Pasadena to Portland 2 years ago, we had a regular walking date at the Rose Bowl together. So we've had many, many conversations, and a few of them have been about facing fearful moments in our lives. I mean, moving from my home that I've lived all over LA, but I lived there my entire life, moving to Portland where I didn't know anyone. And thanks to COVID, I still don't. That was kind of a big deal. And like you, I enjoy speaking, but I think we've talked about this. It's not that we're not afraid. I think that's something that people misunderstand about fear in general. They think people who act with courage don't experience fear. And that's not true, is it?
Well, I hear this a lot from people when I'm talking about how to become a speaker. And the answer will often be, well, you do this all the time. You're used to it. Mm-hmm. Well, I got 2 things to share with you. I don't care how experienced you are as a speaker. I know every time I'm about to speak, I do have to take a moment, prepare myself, do a little breathing, a little meditation, a little grounding, because there is this I'm going to step in front of a crowd of people. And it's a normal automatic body response that I should get a little bit anxious. So I know that about myself. And the other thing too is that the first time I talked in front of a bunch of people, I didn't know what I was doing. But I just decided to risk it and grow. And I learned from other people on ways that I could do it effectively. And over the years, I've grown and developed. So yeah, it is hard to stand up in front of a group of people and talk. Still is to this day. I have to take that moment and breathe and set myself. But the first one, it's okay not to know everything that you're supposed to do and to just step to the fear and do it anyways. It can be a really cool and powerful experience.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the things both you and I experience in our work as therapists and coaches all the time is unless you plan to stay right where you are in your comfort zone, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable, if you want to grow, if you have goals that you haven't achieved yet, you have to deal with fear. Now, before we go further into the topic, because you are a true expert in this, I wonder if you would distinguish, because I think there's a lot of confusion around this. How do you see the difference between fear and anxiety? Because I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably, and I know that you are more specific in how you use them.
So the one thing that I would say that they have in common is both fear or anxiety or anticipation of something that we think may be coming in the future. Okay. So they're a future-based reactivity that we have in ourselves. This thing may happen, and that's our anxiety. I'm going to stand in front of a group of people and they're going to like walk out on me. Fear and anxiety-based things because they're future-oriented. The thing that's really fascinating for me about anxiety is something that we can use like a lot of in-the-moment awareness to manage and bring down for ourselves. You know, me personally, I do a lot of grounding techniques. I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of breathing exercises. If I even found myself in the middle of this interview starting to like feel anxious because I wasn't providing what I needed, you would probably visibly see me like breathing so I can bring myself back to center. And I know that's something you do too. I've always, you know, whenever we talk, you are a big like, and let me figure out what I want to say. Now, the thing that I think is fascinating about fear, and fear is a little bit different for me, is fear is something that also has basis in our past stories. Where anxiety sits mostly in the future-based experience, fear combines the past and the future. It's actually not a present-based thing. That's the thing that's really fascinating about fear. It is about past stories. I failed in the past. Oh, my family used to treat me this way. Oh, when I was in a school assembly, this thing happened. A foundation. And then, oh no, it's going to happen again, a future piece of what fear is. And so those stories get in our brains and they tell us all of this like less than energy. And it plays a number on us. It shuts us down.
One of the things I hear people say all the time is, just when I was moving forward, just when I got this thing in my life or my business or my relationship under control. And sometimes they'll say, every time it feels like I'm finally getting my shit together or whatever expression they're using, X happens. And that just feels like such a self-fulfilling prophecy to me that I understand they are trying to prevent themselves from experiencing disappointment. But the way I look at it, it almost brings about the thing that you fear will happen because you're basically telling your brain that's what's going to happen. And the brain just likes to follow the directions.
Well, you know, there's another aspect of that too. If we just turn that story a tiny bit, is when we are going out and trying new things. 2021 was my year at the podcast. Who knew? But, we were all in COVID lockdown. Actually, 2020 was the year of the podcast for me because speaking in public wasn't as available. So there was a lot to learn in that. But for me, the thing is, whenever I hit that like, oh no, something's not going to work today, or, oh, that camera I have, I now see the coverage and it's really poor. I need to get a better camera. Like for me, when I hit those moments, that's actually an interesting clue to my brain that I am heading in the right direction. Now, I know this sounds really peculiar, but what I needed to do for myself is be comfortable with like being in levels of discomfort. So when I am trying at something new, there are going to be levels of discomfort. I have to need to build my ability to sit in that discomfort and still move forward. So for a lot of people, when they try something new, it's going to be uncomfortable. And then that gets perceived as failure or this like something is now an obstacle. And what's actually happening is rather than walking down the road you always walk down every single day, you've chosen a new road and you have to see what the things are in that road to be able to move down it more successfully.
So that totally makes sense. And I think it's not only the stories that we tell us, like, for example, I used to tell myself a story that I'm no good with technology. And I would say, I didn't say I'm a no tech or a non-tech. I just say I'm not comfortable with technology. I'm not good at technology. And I said it often. Well, when I made the decision to go from being a therapist to being a coach and from working face to face to working online, now I had created a problem for myself because I needed technology to allow me to work with clients virtually. So there I was with my story and with my aspirations and my goals. And the only way I was going to be able to take the steps to confront the fear that I wasn't going to be able to figure it out, that it was going to be too hard, that I was going to, blow up the world by pushing the wrong button, all the kind of things that people think when they don't understand technology very well. I had to be willing to experience those levels of discomfort and to say, it's okay that you're feeling this. Of course you're feeling this. It makes sense that you're feeling this. You're doing this for the first time and your brain thinks something could go wrong. So it's just sending up a warning signal that this is an unfamiliar situation. It might not go the way you want. And that's a little bit of feedback for you. Now, what I do with that is, as you say, I'm the one who has to say, it's okay that you're feeling that way. It's normal that you're feeling that way. And this is what you're going to do about it. And sometimes it's just a couple of breaths, deep, slow breaths, where you realize my head is not going to explode. I'm not going to blow up the world. And if I don't do this right the first time, I can try it again.
Well, but the other thing that's interesting too, and I know this has been, part of my journey, because here's the deal with fear. We don't just get over it once and then life's perfect. We hit fear over and over and over and over again. And it's okay. It really is. But like one thing you were just pointing out, like when you're trying something new and the fear comes up, that it can be a signal of change. I think it's also a really cool thing. Like, what if we make fear an ally? And like in your case, I'm learning technical stuff and I'm having some anxiety about this camera stuff. Oh, I'm going to reach out to someone I know who does this and learn from them. I'm going to go online and read a little bit more. I'm going to do a practice thing with one of my kids just to see how I can get used to like looking into this camera and, adjusting my, what if that fear is actually a signal to say like, oh, cool, you're heading into something. You're feeling something, maybe you need a little bit more information. It's not just jumping into the deep end of the pool, but maybe fear is also this little gift that kind of pings our brain and says, okay, maybe I need to do a little bit more before I take that dive into the pool.
I love what you said about like the fear being evidence that you're growing. Because the truth is, if we're only doing the things that we're used to doing, there really isn't fear there. There may be a lot of other emotions, but fear isn't going to be primary. Fear shows up when we're doing something new and we want to know the outcome. And you're right. You're not in the moment. Like you and I both practice meditation and mindfulness. And what I understand about mindfulness is that, depression is usually you're thinking about the past, anxiety and fear, you're thinking about the future. But in this moment right now, why am I afraid? Mm-hmm. It's because I'm not actually in this moment right now. I'm in the future thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. And based on my life experience, most of the things I've been afraid of never actually did happen. I was just so worried they would. Like even this morning before we started recording this, you asked me if I wanted to record with audio and video or just audio. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure because I don't have all the pieces ready yet. And you were like, why don't we just use this as an opportunity to move through fear? And I'm like, this is why you are one of my closest friends. Because you're right. And you know what? Just doing it, I don't know if I did it right, but I already feel better because I did it. I don't think the fear can stay there when you take action. Would you agree?
Yes. And I also think it's so important, like you and I are doing this together. Now, the interesting thing about our conversation is I do a lot of media work, so I'm used to being on camera. So for me to sit here and talk with you today, it's like half of the equation is totally comfortable with it. And that then means, oh, I've got an ally who's going to come along with me. Like, Diann, you don't have to worry about your guest feeling awkward or funny. When we decided we were going to try the video out, I said, oh, hold on a second. I need to bring some more lighting because I'm really like hot on one side. And you were kind of like, I love you for that. Okay. But we're doing this together. And I think that's a really important thing in walking through fear too, is finding our allies, finding those people that are there for us. You know, Diann mentioned that we used to take our walks around the Rose Bowl every Wednesday morning. And those were amazing moments because sometimes we would like have conversations about changing the world. And sometimes we would have these really deep conversations about change we were trying to initiate in ourselves. And just having an ally, someone there that I could walk with and like share, you know, I'm thinking of doing this thing and I'm a little bit anxious about it. I'm not sure how it's going to play out or what the results are. And then to have someone like Diann like feed back, you know, wow, when you say that, I'm wondering if. And all of a sudden, I had this ally walking through this fearful experience with me. And I think it's really important, you know, in my life to pursue what I call the light bringers. And these are those people when you hang out with them, that you end up feeling energized and excited and ready to move forward and wanting more. And I think we really need to search out those people, especially when we're walking through fear.
You know what? That is such a good point, and I absolutely agree. We have talked about this a number of times between the two of us, but I think especially for people who they may be in the mental health profession, they might be some other professional helper, healer. It's not so much the case with coaches and speakers. There's an understanding that you do need to do a lot of marketing and promotion, but therapists don't really have that history. And also people that are very sensitive, people who identify as empaths and so forth. The whole notion of putting themselves out there, asking people to hire them or to work with them, to pay them for their gifts is probably one of the fearful moments that almost everyone listening probably experiences on a regular basis. I know so many gifted people, and I know you do as well, who are absolutely scared shitless to put themselves out there to say, hey, I made this. What do you think? And I'm hoping that you have some really wonderful wisdom for how to work with that in particular, because it's complicated. It taps into self-worth. It taps into our stories. It taps into past trauma. It taps into identity and so many things. But boy, if we can start to manage that better and be fearful and put ourselves out there, it's life-changing.
Well, you know, as you were saying that, it reminded me of a moment, and you know this story I'm about to share. There's this really amazing opportunity. I have a good friend who's a realtor here in Pasadena. And when I first started out, she was actually one of my marketing mentors because realtors, like, they've got like all these techniques down. And what I would do is sit with her and learn from her and then try and apply it to, you know, the kind of work that I was doing. And over time,
How did you even think of that, though, John? Honestly, like I know of no one other than you from the therapy business who would think, you know, I could learn a lot about marketing myself from a successful realtor. Like, where did that even come from?
I don't know if I have a clear answer for that. But what I do have is when those intuitive things pop into my brain, I just follow them.
Yeah.
You know, there's one day it's like, okay, well now I'm fully licensed and I want to start building some stuff. Who are people? Cynthia would be a great person just to talk to and maybe get some support from. And for me, it is about following that like intuitive brain sometimes. You know, we all have those moments. You're in the shower, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're driving the car and suddenly something pops into your brain. Those intuitive moments, I think, are so valuable and so important. And I just would encourage everyone, hold on to those. I know for myself, because sometimes lots of ideas float through my brain, I collect them.
I can't relate to that at all.
They may not be ones that I'm going to do right now, but I collect them.
Yes.
So in my office, I actually have this really cool board. What I do is I put these ideas on Post-its, and then I have a side that says for now and a side that says for the future. And because they're on Post-its, I can move them back and forth. It's like, oh, I can look at the for future signs. Like, you know what? I want to work on that this week. And I'll bring it over the for now thing. But I got something on the now side that I'm like, you know what? I did some work. I want to keep it in mind. I'll move it. But for me, it's about gathering those things, because those intuitive moments are the brilliant ones. They're the ones that if we can start to follow, they're going to guide us through fear like nobody's business. It's going to be like this beautiful lightning bolt that hits and allows you to open up to possibilities you never even imagined, you know? And the thing is, with this realtor, so I'm going to get back to the story because it really was stepping through fear for me. She was having this breakfast she was sponsoring. And in the invitation she sent me, and because she's a realtor, she sent it through the mail. It was all beautifully embossed and lovely. And it was like 12 of my most, special, experts in their fields, bringing them together for breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then I was like, wait, do I have a place at that table? Well, who am I? I mean, I know some of the people are going to be there. Like there's the editor of the local newspaper, and there's this, the civic leader, and there's the doctor of so-and-so at the big hospital. Where's my place at the table? And I went through this whole like internal struggle of just this fear-based story of less than, and, like fear does this like thing, especially like time tunnels us back to our little childhood self when we were told like, no, you're not enough to do something. All of that was playing out of my brain and my body. Okay. And I was taking it, I had RSVP'd, yes. I just let my gut do it. But the fear kept hanging out. And I was walking my dog the morning of the event, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to text her and just say I'm sick or something. I can't do this. I cannot do this. I don't belong there. And as I was walking the dog, always good, get some blood flowing, some oxygen flowing, I started letting that go a little bit and realizing, well, maybe I don't think I belong there, but somebody else believes that I do. And this goes once again back to that kind of buddy system. How do other people support
Allies
you? And Cynthia sees me as someone who has a place at that table. And the more I walked, the more I was like, okay, you can do this. Your reasons not to go aren't as big as your reasons to go anymore. Let's do this. And I got in the house. I got myself showered and dressed as fast as I could, drove to the location, was there about half an hour early, but I didn't want to give myself any leeway to like jump out of it. And it was so beautiful and so wonderful and so empowering. And I met some great people and I learned so much about them. And they got to learn about what I do. And I walked away from that and I did this thing. Diann knows I do this, or you take your right hand, you put over your left shoulder and you pat yourself on the shoulder. I was really proud of myself for doing that. Once again, following intuition, following these interesting leads that show up, realtor, marketing, beautiful, letting other people be allies to carry you along the way. And finally, just showing up.
Do you think people need to meditate or learn mindfulness techniques or breathing techniques to really be able to move through fear? Because you and I are both enthusiasts and practitioners, but I work with a lot of people with ADHD and anxiety, and a lot of them tell me, oh, no, I can't meditate. No, I can't sit still and make my mind go blank. I'm like, well, first of all, that's not what meditation is. But it can be a hard sell for people with busy brains, creative people. And obviously, we don't try to convince people to do things they're not open to doing. But I'm just curious, between you and I and everyone listening, how important do you think that is in your experience? Like, because you work with a lot of people who some use mindfulness techniques and some don't. What do you think? Does it make a huge difference, or it's nice, but not necessary?
Okay. So we've opened up a whole other episode here, but here goes. I am an absolute supporter of meditation and mindfulness techniques. The thing that I think is so important to understand is everyone believes that there's this one way of doing it. Sitting on a mountaintop as a Zen monk with the bamboo in the background and the wind chimes and absolute silence. Well, I'm here to tell you, we live in a very active world where that may not always be possible. And the thing that I talk to people, especially when they have some anxiety about trying out meditation, is that there are as many ways to meditate as there are people who want to meditate.
Amen.
And to imagine there's only one way to do it is not paying attention to my unique needs, Diann's unique needs. Because I will guarantee Diann and I meditate very differently. and we use the process for different things. And that's the thing. It is this piece of work that you can do for yourself that will open up just a tiny bit of peace or quietness in your brain that will allow you to access and do the things you want to do. Even before coming on our podcast today, and I do this every single time whenever I'm doing any type of appearance like this, is I come early, I set everything up, and then I sit for a moment, and I sit with my feet in the ground, I sit with my back tall, and I just breathe for this first few moments until it's time to come online. That is so important for me to be able to access this information that I want to share. Because if I don't, I'll just be like all over the place. And the other thing that's really funny too, and this once again, it sounds strange. This is a mindfulness technique. I'm sitting here with both feet flat on the floor. That has got me anchored and grounded. I'm sitting here with my spine tall. That's keeping me aligned and open. That's allowing me to breathe. All of these are pieces of mindfulness. If I sat here like in a chair and started slouching and hanging out, eventually my energy would be here and like, yeah, Diann, so I think we're sitting through fear. But when I bring myself up and I can move, and you may laugh, it's a podcast, but I'm really moving around when I'm doing this because all of that is allowing me to be mindful of the answers that I'm giving you. Diann knows how my brain works. So just everybody go with me for 1 second. There's this really cool interview. Trying to remember who it was with. It was actually with someone who's like a major interviewer, like a Terry Gross or a Diann Sawyer or something like that. And they were talking about the process of interviewing people, especially politicians. They said this really fascinating thing. They said, I know the person's not authentic and they're just spitting out their verbiage is when I ask them a question and before the last word even leaves my mouth, they've already started their answer. And that's when I know they're just going on their well-prepared script. But when that person, I ask them a question, you can see that moment in their eyes where they're like taking in the information, taking in my entire question. Maybe there's a little bit of a pause, maybe even an awkward moment. And then they speak. That's when I know I'm accessing the authentic person. And that's why even in this really like rush world, this medium of, social media and video and quick cuts and everything being right on and always having to go spark, taking that moment helps me personally to access that deeper knowledge. And so I think all of those things play out in how we approach our world experience and how powerful mindfulness and meditation can be.
I love that so much. And I think, as long as I've known you, I continue to learn with you and from you. Being a person with ADHD, my tendency is to always do everything at the last minute. It's a very well-developed habit, and it does create a fair amount of stress in my life. Not enough to get me to stop most of the time. But as you were talking about, let's be honest, as you were talking about coming early and just sitting with your thoughts about what you want to share and how you want to show up and being physically grounded and all that, I just felt so relaxed and was able to realize what a difference that would make to how I show up for my interviews. I think sometimes people like me and people who keep themselves very, very busy and rushing from thing to thing, I think sometimes we might have the mistaken notion that rushing around brings a lot of energy, but I think energy isn't really what it brings. I think it brings kind of a frenetic feeling that may be mistaken for energy, but being grounded, you're not going to forget anything that you want to say, and you're going to really be connected to the person you're talking to. And I think what I love most of all from what you've shared today is about tapping into your allies. I have never been anywhere near as good at that as you are. And I think because I grew up with this idea that I have to do it all myself. I should be able to do this, and I should be able to do it by myself. So that made asking for help very challenging, like a negative impression of me. But you have always modeled for me the value in asking other people to help, not only because you give them the opportunity to serve, but it relieves you of this ridiculous notion that you should be good at everything. It's impossible.
It is.
And unnecessarily stressful too.
Well, the thing that's funny is that what you and I do have a similarity in that I can get everything done. I can take on everything. I do know that about myself. I'm going to be completely honest. At the same time, I've also realized, so I'm a fantastic therapist. I'm an amazing coach. I'm really powerful in the speaking circuit. I'm not a great tax person. So what am I going to do? I'm going to bring in someone who does taxes really, really well. And I'm going to bring in someone that may actually cost a little bit more than your average, like just down the block tax company. Why do I do that? Because my time is valuable to me. And if I can use that time that it would take me to do taxes, would be like, 60 hours probably. All of what I could bring into my life in those 60 hours is worth paying a really talented person who can do it in 3 hours because it's what they do. It's what their expertise is. I'm not a plumber. There are things I'm not going to be able to fix around this house. So I want to bring in the best crew that I can to fix the things that I can't do. So it is about that idea. Yeah, I probably can do just about everything. And I could figure out the plumbing if I wanted to. But is it the best use of my time? Is doing my own taxes the best use of my time? And that's where some of that monetary fear has to be looked at so that we can overcome and say, yes, it is worth the value of hiring a tax expert to come in and do this and know everything that I could possibly use on those taxes and spend the money on it. Because so many people live in that fear of like opening up that pocketbook and sharing. And, in a way, if you find these really great craftspeople in your life, you are bringing on more allies. So for years, I've had the same tax person, and it was great because we had this amazing rhythm of how we did it and how we connected, and I knew what to send him, and he knew what to ask me, and it was this great experience. And we were with him probably about 15 years. Well, unfortunately, he passed away last fall, and I had to find a new tax person. You're going to love this. Of course, I reached out to all my friends to say, who's your tax person? Because I do like to use my allies. And then I found a couple of people. I chatted with them, interviewed, found this new person. But we've had to find our new rhythm through it. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been completely comfortable. It hasn't been as smooth as it's been in the past. But I am learning to trust this person. And I'm starting to build a new ally, a new work person who's part of my team. Once again, stepping through the initial fear of like, I have to find a new person to now like, I think I found my new person and let's see where we can take this.
It's such a good point, John, because a lot of people are not really content with the circumstances in their life, whether that be the person that's cutting their hair, or the person that's sharing their bed, or the neighborhood they're living in, what they do for a living. But the notion of making a change just brings up so much fear. And I think that's a perfect example of, you had a really good gig for a really long time with someone, but why make it more difficult for yourself than it needs to be when you need to change? Why not look at it as an opportunity to find a new ally? Mm-hmm. That thought is equally available to you.
And also know that in change, fear is going to show up. Okay, it is change.
Could you just repeat that again for the folks in the back?
In change, fear is going to show up. They're like best buddies going to the ball game of your life together. Change comes up, it calls up fears like, hey, there's a game today. We should go watch John's life. I just think everybody needs to be aware of that.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, and the thing is change can be scary. But what I do for myself is I focus on what's on the other side of change. What am I looking for? And the thing about that is that I don't lock in that there's only one possible result. For me, it's okay, I'm in the middle of change. I'm visualizing this thing as to where I'm heading or something better. So that I give myself some freedom along the way. Because if I just bulldoze my way towards the thing that I think is the goal, I may miss an opportunity that could take me to the moon. And so when change comes up, please know that fear is going to follow. It's going to, once again, backtrack into all those childhood moments where you may have failed, where you may have had as a friend of mine says, and I love this expression, it's so funny, is you have the French nanny wagging their finger in your face. Okay, that's fear. It's going to show up when you have change. All the reasons why you're supposed to fail are going to raise their heads. But if we can trust in change and understand that change is part of what makes our gardens beautiful, what takes us from raw cookie dough to beautifully baked cookies. It's what helps us travel through when we paint a room from wet paint to the color deepening as it dries. Change is really powerful. And if we can embrace that, knowing that fear is going to show up with it, we can have an amazing and bountiful life experience.
Do you see why I love him so much? This has been such a fantastic conversation. And I'm just thinking of so many other repeat interviews. I could have you come back and talk about money fears and charging what you're worth and just so many things that I have learned from you and that you are so special at teaching. Would you let everybody know how they can find you? And of course, I'm going to link to all of this in the show notes, your Instagram account, your website, and anywhere else that you would like us to find you.
Absolutely. So I love the Diann through the Insta thing because she knows this is actually a new thing for me going on Instagram. I am fumbling my way through it effectively. So if you want to watch me fumble through it, you can find me at John Sovec Therapy.
He's being modest. It's a beautiful feed with these most amazing quotes and colors. You've got to go follow him. Stop what you're doing right now. Well, you can listen to the rest of this podcast, but then you must go follow John on Instagram.
And you can join me when I do make mistakes, because there are going to be some, okay? You can find my website, which is johnsovec.com, JOHNSOVEC.com. You can find me at Twitter at John Sovec. And you know what? If you just Google my name, there's all kinds of fun stuff that'll help inspire you and maybe help you make it through your day.
I love it. You have some really beautiful meditation and mindfulness stuff on the internet as well. So I encourage you to get to know John and all the juicy goodness he brings to the world. Thank you, my friend.
I love being juicy.
Hey, it's Diann. Can I be honest with you? At the beginning of each new year, I always told myself, this is the year I'm going to get my habits dialed in. This is the year I'm going to be crystal clear about my goals and I'm going to crush them. This is the year I'm going to get my shit together on every level and I'm going to do it all by myself. Been there, done that, got a whole stack of t-shirts. But it wasn't until I started working with my own coach that I realized what a difference it makes to have guidance, support, and accountability from someone who's not only like-minded, but like-brained. Yeah, I'm talking about another driven woman, entrepreneur, who also has ADHD and has got it going on. I have 2 openings in my signature one-on-one 12-week coaching program, and one of them might have your name on it. There's a link to a free consult with me in the show notes if you think this might be the year that you really get serious and go all in on an ADHD-friendly business and life. While you're thinking about that, have a listen to what one of my clients' success stories has to say about the difference it made to work with me.
It's funny because at first I said I would never own my own practice. And now I own my own practice. And I would say, I'm never going to take it any more than just treating patients. And now I'm thinking about how can I start my own
institute.
Yeah, exactly. Even like training other therapists, having a certification with my name that I am, I haven't thought of the name yet, but I'm certified in this technique or whatever the case may be. And really just helping other therapists help their patients the way I help mine.
You've been listening to the Driven Woman Podcast with Diann Wingert. Want more straight talk and strategy each week that will take you from spinning to winning? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your podcast player so you won't miss a single episode. Then head on over to the Driven Woman free and private Facebook group community. See you there.